Trirat Lipton, U.S. Air Force. I was fuels deployed as a security forces augmentee. Came back kind of messed up, and my health declined over the course of several years over that because of lack of access to education and knowledge on what was going on inside my head and soul. Kind of spiraled out of control in terms of my mental stability, and had some drinking problems, and had a few episodes where I was hospitalized and spent some time as a long-term inpatient at various VA facilities. And
welcome, everyone. I'd like to take a moment to introduce. We have Trirat Lipton. Tree spent several years in the Air Force, ended up coming back with some issues, PTSD, concussion stuff, and I'm real excited to hear his story. We have Sean Enton, good friend over the years, has his own story regarding recovery, and of course, Ty Starkovich. How many years did you do as a sniper, Ty?
From 99 until 2011 in the military. So 12 years as a sniper, 14 years total.
A lot of time in the field, but the main issue there is that you saw a lot of people come back injured psychologically. And really the focus here is to kind of bear down and do what we can to help these fellers get better.
Yeah,
ladies and fellers.
Absolutely, man. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. Thanks for being here, Tree. Sean, thanks for being next to me for this. I appreciate this setup, and I think we're going to have some fun with it and dig down into the issues and hopefully get some answers. I'm excited to learn about your experience, Tree. So, Tree, this is all about you. We're going to talk about your story. So let's go right into who you are, and we'll go from there. So tell us about yourself, where you're from, and bring us from your journey, and where you started out at, grew up, and where you ended up now.
So I guess the primary thing that really kind of set me into a downward spiral was I had a sexual assault experience when I was deployed, and I never really pursued it. I left it as a closed case. I didn't want to dredge up all that anger and pain and just to put somebody on the stand and have them be responsible. And to be honest with you, I didn't even see the people. Is more of them and one of me. So unfortunately that was a big part of it, and a couple other parts of it were watching other people around me who had also experienced that thing, and they weren't as strong at the time, and I was lucky enough to be around to intervene on several other individuals' behalf and get them the help they needed. And I suspect that's what kind of kept me afloat when I was out there until I got back. Because after I got back, I really didn't have a whole lot supporting me up in terms of my mental health. I remember that first week I was back, and I said something to my NCO, and it's like, I don't feel right. I don't, want to talk about kind of what happened out there. I feel kind of jacked up, and I got laughed off, and so I dropped it, and I left it alone, and sleep got worse, mood got worse, the drinking got worse, and I got to a point where I actually just craved getting out and leaving. So I decided to palace chase into the reserves from active duty. And I thought the downgrade in responsibility and the activeness would help kind of separate me emotionally, physically, from the things that I thought were hurting me. Yeah, it kind of slowed things down and lengthened it out, but that's the bad part. It lengthened it out.
Sure. And how long did you alone suffer, basically, with, I mean, you went to your NCOs, your non-commissioned officers, your superiors about this. and were basically laughed at, or it was pushed to the side because they probably didn't want to deal with it or didn't believe you. How long did you deal with that before you were able to get real intervention for your emotional health? How many years?
I think it was like 2 or 3 years or something like that. I ended up going into a VA hospital, and I was talking with my wife, and then just like something ain't right. And I went in and I got checked out, and you know, and it was probably one of the few good experiences I had at the VA, because I had nothing to, really like quantify what was going on with me. And it just kind of got the diagnosis of PTSD. And I had already gone through a couple like manic episodes. And I mean, I had already made an attempt on my life, going from active to reserve. When I was in the reserves, I made an attempt on my life, and um, they kind of fast tracked me on the way out to getting health care through the VA, and I ended up separating. But yeah, it was a few years before I got anything like really set and put down on paper, saying what was what, and putting a label to it.
And what was your mindset from the point where you've been on this on an island essentially for 3 years dealing with this by yourself? You're going to the VA to get treatment. What was your mindset right then and there? I mean, obviously you've attempted to take your own life. That's a desperate mindset right there. What was your mindset about healing after all of that, moving forward? Like what kept you going? What was it that kept you going to keep seeking treatment after that entire debacle?
Uh, my wife, and pretty much that's it. My wife and kid.
Mm,
Um,
that's his why.
she never made any ultimatums. She always asked me what I needed, and she was there to visit me when I was, you know, in like, the care facilities and everything like that. And she never made it about herself. Uh, I mean, I could go on and on and on, but she was the perfect partner.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's great motivation, and obviously a child to stick around for is a huge one as well. Let's talk about, how did you meet Mark Squibb and get familiar with the LiveO2 system, and where were you at mentally then, and how were you able to kind of breach that trust, that abyss, and go do something so outside of the box? Talk us through that.
So I met Mark Squibb. He's actually a relative of my wife, an uncle, and we were living in a house that was owned by the family, jointly owned by the family, and we were renting. And never met him before. He'd been out in Colorado, and he, him and his wife came over to do a closing on the house, sign paperwork for it, and he happened to be in the yard looking over the stuff. And we just got to chatting, and he held out an olive branch, I guess is the way to put it. He said, if you can make it out to my place, we'll give something a shot. And I was at a point where I had just basically got off a whole bunch of medications, because at that point I was turning into a zombie. I couldn't stand up. um I was stage 3 hypertension. um just had wild blood pressure issues, and some energy was just either off the charts, or not there at all. And so it was pretty wild ride in terms of my mental and energy abilities, just coping mechanisms. But yeah, I ended up going out to Colorado, what was it, like a month later or so later. And I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know. I basically had given up, and resigned myself to trying to navigate my life the best that I could. I wasn't accomplishing anything. I was just,
Going
you
through
know,
the
I was just
motion.
kind of just trying to live.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah.
When you got to Dr. Squibb's place, kind of describe when you got there and what it was like walking into that, the environment, how you felt, and what it was like during that treatment, and how long your initial treatment was.
So over the course of a week, I spent several sessions on the bike, more than once a day, at least 15 minutes at a time. And after the first few things, first few sessions, I immediately felt like, hard to describe at the time, that I didn't know back then, but the physiological response, the physical response to the treatment, was something that I had never expected to happen. And there were some things, that I was feeling physically that were new. And then on the emotional side, um, my emotional responses to certain things were, I don't know how to explain it, like kind of colorful in a way, instead of separated like left or right. I I felt, I don't know, I felt more complete. You can take a whole piece of something, split it in half, and it separates from each other, and you know and then after you're done with that, it's just like that. I'm not real good at explaining this kind of stuff. All I know is that, um there are a lot more pieces that I didn't know were there that kind of fell in together, and I was able to process things in a way that, I had been a long time waiting for that kind of thing to happen, I guess.
Yeah. Kind of like dropping a completed jigsaw puzzle on a floor or on a table, and it's kind of spread out, and you're starting to put the pieces back
Yeah,
to make Pangea. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it was kind of rough. Like, it was overwhelming, and I cried, and but I understood. Like, there was an emotional understanding there, I guess, if that's the best way to put it, that I understood what was going on inside my head.
Okay, so it was
and
like
and
an
I felt,
like clarity.
there was an acknowledgement there of pain that was being processed in a different way that wasn't traumatic.
So it was like cathartic, right? It was you're getting
Yeah.
sort of
I
release.
mean, it felt good. I mean,
Awesome.
it's not like these things never happened, right? And in a certain way, you disassociate from traumatic experiences, and you relegate them to kind of a shitty experience, and then and you try to divorce yourself of that identity, I guess. um, but at that time, it was, throughout the treatments, and then later on, I came to a realization, these are these are things that happened to me, and I was there when it happened, and it was a bad time, but I'm still alive, and I didn't really feel that I deserved to like beat down on myself so hard anymore. Now, what prompted that change in me? They talk about that. I mean, I've been through a lot of talk therapy, and they all say that, right? And every victim doesn't believe it, and then they used, pills to help me come to that space in my head, and I don't know, kind of magical to, breathe deep and seek peace, kind of thing, and have that be like the primary uh, vehicle for healing. It was kind of hilarious how easy how easy it was, and how quickly it changed things inside my head. So
Describe who Tree was going into it day one versus when you left after, what was it, day 5 of the initial trip down?
day one, I needed decompression time. I arrived. I was kind of messed up from the ride out there. I flew out, and then I drove out, and the drive was um, stressful. Yeah, I mean, it was stressful. Um,
A lot
I
of time.
mean, the day after, it was almost like it didn't happen. I mean, anybody goes through these episodes where uh, you're put in a spot, and when your mental health is not so great, the next day doesn't happen for you. You don't get up the next day and do something.
Yep. You
You
recover.
It burns you, man. It burns you for a long time, and something that happened, weeks ago could still be affecting you, or you could be ping ponging back and forth for like the next, hours. I mean, the time and scope of your ups and downs could be the same, but crunched within a larger or shorter time period,
Sure.
you're just as erratic as you ever were. But that ping pong effect kind of stopped for me.
Good. So you're able to stabilize your moods up and down along a longer timeline. So you didn't have as much
Yeah,
erratic movement within a short amount of time. So you're
call it emotional
more
mass.
stabilized, right?
Emotional mass. It's harder to move, and
There you
you
go.
know.
Nice. I love it. That is great stuff. So 5 days, you went through the treatment. It obviously worked for you. What would keep you back from getting this treatment? Like what do you see as the biggest drawback for somebody who needs this type of treatment? And like basically, if they had a Live O2 machine in their house, would that be sufficient, or is it more beneficial to go to a place like Dr. Squibb's, a treatment facility, and working with people in an environment of trust or whatever? Tell me the ideal scenario for this, and what the setbacks are for the everyday person that you can identify.
So heading out there, I'll be I'll be honest. I don't know what the exact costs of all the machinery is, and then how much an in-person thing versus just having it delivered to your door. But definitely beneficial to have somebody run you through the protocol
Mm-hmm.
while you're just getting started, so you know exactly what it is that you need to do. Having a second person there who knows how to run it, um, regardless of if they're part of his team or not, as long as you have a second person there to know how to run you on the bike and the machine, that is also very helpful. Um, Different varying levels of exertion that you can subject yourself to
Sure.
on this machine. But being in Mark's place, it was. I mean, there's definitely not much detracting from a therapeutic environment. Um, Professional, clean living space, beautiful mountain scenery. So you walk outside, you're not exposed to the public. Um, Kind of a hike to get out there, but I mean, I know of another relative who has the machine at home, and he swears by it. And I don't know whether he heard it from one of the other relatives or if I had mentioned it to him or not, but he ended up getting a machine for his home use, and it's turned his life around. So uh, I imagine it depends on the individual. You can benefit from being in person, but you definitely can't lose out just having it in your house either.
Yeah, for sure. I went on it the other day. Taylor Smith, he put me through a 15-minute cycle, and I had done it before, like a couple days before that, and it was definitely beneficial to have somebody pushing you, like in your ear when you got to go max effort. It was so I would think
Yeah, you
somebody.
can't look at those numbers while you're pumping away.
Right. Somebody, and also like you got to have somebody there almost, it feels like, to switch that thing back and forth and coach you on, on going. But the training is awesome. I love it. It's, for me, afterwards, I felt lightheaded, but not dizzy. I guess that's what happens when you have a bunch of oxygen going to your head. it was a unique experience, and it was fantastic. But I'm really glad it worked for you, and I'm hoping that a whole lot of people like yourself can get exposed to the training and benefit from what Mr. Squibb has done and the Livo 2 machine itself. So, Sean, you got anything else you want to?
Tree, well, first of all, I want to thank you so much for just coming out and explaining your story. Being violated, no fun. I've had my own journey of, what I've been through, and the feeling that, I got was lacking my purpose and lacking my why. And I think my why for me to continue on was my daughters, and hit a message that, hey, I was allowed to live through everything I've been through, and now to really share a message and be an advocate for what modalities, and like Mark Squibb, the inventor, is really what he's doing out of the goodness of his heart. And this stuff works. I mean, I'm a product of so much as well. And, our team with Adventures in Health is really kind of bringing us around with Ty Lee and the charge on the veteran side. But I want to thank you. And just the more you keep talking, the better for everybody.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm glad to be here. You couldn't pay me to be here. I'd seen a lot of people like lose themselves, in terms of their health while I was in, and the VA being what it is what it is. But at the same time, it's like, when your numbers of suicide increase and the amount of people on like psychotropic, drugs, antidepressants, any sort of things, it stands to question that what are we doing with our resources? We have this huge external entity to the military to take care of these folks, and of course they're bogged down by their red tape and bureaucracy and what is and what is not allowed and approved. But I can't stress enough that if I hadn't found Mark, I don't know where I'd be right now. I wouldn't be, sure as hell wouldn't be talking to you guys. And I don't think I'd be in very good health right now.
Wow.
So.
And then too, also, Tree, I wanted to thank you for your service, because guys like you and Ty really protected our country and protected my family. And if it wasn't for you guys, I don't think anybody would be safe.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you for your service. Ty next to me is, 14 years in the Army, 3 tours in Afghanistan and Iraq, and back to back. And he saw, hundreds of days of combat. I don't even understand how both of you, or especially him, is even to live another day. But, as what he often says, you conquer the day, or you conquer the
day and conquer the mission.
And so I salute you both on that.
I just want to make a distinction, kind of important for people to understand that where Ty has had multiple combat tours, I have not. This kind of thing can happen to anybody, and that your need for validation, if you're injured and you think you are, you definitely are, and it's not the sole realm of being in the military as well. But I just wanted to make that distinction as well, that anybody can get hurt, and anybody's hurt can have a hard time recovering.
Absolutely. Yeah, there shouldn't be a higher pedestal for trauma and the emotional aftermath of the effects of that, based on circumstances. So, what you went through was highly unexpected. What I signed up for and went to go do, I kind of had an idea that I would be involved in that kind of stuff. And when you're attacked in your own personal space, you don't expect that. You don't sign up for that. So, going through what you went through and the trauma, I could not even imagine that, because 1, I've never experienced it. I would never sign up for that. And it's just, that's so outside of my human norm, right? That just, it shouldn't happen. So, what you're going through is in a lot of ways a lot more difficult than what a lot of people who've deployed and seen a lot of combat have gone through. So thank you for being strong and sharing your story.
I think about it and just talking about it. It's been a while since I talked about it.
For sure.
But yeah, don't get me wrong. It still hurts. And, I'm glad that, my emotional response is healthy to it now.
Good.
Get off at the end of this podcast and I'll feel good about having helped somebody rather than, sinking back down that slippery hole again.
For sure.
Absolutely. Hey, Mark, could you do us a favor and maybe explain in simple terms what the Livo-2 does for depression and PTSD, and was done yourself and Tree and Ty?
Well, the first thing I'll mention was that actually Ty was a second member of a group. There was another fellow with us named Nathan, who was probably 15 years into or post his experience. So what we did with Ty and Nathan was we basically set up I think it was 7 or 8 station training circuit. And, I'm not a doctor, so I'm really more into, kind of coaching. And we had a staff of military, Steve and Eric, and then, my internal crew. And what we did was we basically ran them from, coming in, we do psychological profile, as in neurological panels, more testing for organic brain injury. And what we found with these guys is that they had basically had so many concussions that fairly large percentages of their brain was just literally offline. And so when I thought about this, like, okay, well, we need to fix the organic brain, but then once the organic brain kind of comes back on, then all of a sudden they need to sort of deprogram from their things. And I'm talking kind of technical. I'm not a doctor, I'm an engineer, but I'm thinking more like systems. So when we engineered the processes, like come in, we test them day one, and the testing is a little hard, but it gave us real data. But then it's like, hey man, Ty, we want you to kick your ass, or get them into the process and transfer the responsibility of healing to them, which is, hey man, it's your job to heal yourself. And I also wanted to do it in a place where they could step outside, feel safe, high ground effectively. My wife had cooking going all the time, so they walk in, they got kids, they got food, just all of these safety things that let them feel like, all right, this is a place where I don't have to worry. And then it was a social thing because they were, in the presence of a band of brothers. Most everybody was either family or military. So setting up the space where they could feel safe and relax and really just concentrate on helping them. And then, like we had, I guess, 5 or 6. So the point I was just trying to make is there's I'll call it the organic brain injury healing, which we were doing kind of first, which the role of Livo-2 was to oxygenate the brain. And then once the brain got oxygen, if they had I'll call it a mild concussion injury, a lot of times that healed very quickly, literally within days or the same day. But there were different layers of that. So what we did was basically push them through the same circuit over and over again. We were doing nutrients, blood modulation, blood pressure modulation, etc., all using supplements. So it's like, yeah, they had breakfast, but they had no idea all of the stuff that was built into breakfast. And then the backside of every day was like an emotional process that was designed for emotional unwinding. We used 2 different techniques. So the point was like, this is really more about a training circuit, and it was really more reminiscent of PT. And like, hey man, I mean, we just the trainers were all military. It's like, okay, man, we're going to kick your ass. And so there was this aggressive focus on putting them in a place to heal themselves. Tree, would you comment on is that how it felt? Or?
Yeah, you definitely hit it right on the head. I just remember from our previous conversations in terms of the concussion, basically where traumatic brain injury mimics a concussion in terms of its physical effects on the brain. So an emotional trauma can transfer itself into a physical effect on your brain matter, I guess. But yeah, it was reminiscent of PT, but not like basic training PT, more like, you're your first base and you're doing squad PT together, and or flight PT to get whatever branch you're in. It's different names for your branch. That doesn't matter. But yeah, that kind of drive, and you're right there on center stage, and you get pushed out, and it feels familiar. So it's not something that you're not unfamiliar with. It's old friend. I suspect that everybody in some way, shape, or form really kind of disliked PT when they were in, but at the same time, like, doing it with a bunch of guys and gals, and having a laugh afterwards as you know, get back to work for that day or whatever, and go back home. That sense of camaraderie, that's the spirit of it, was kind of brought back into things in a not so painful way, I guess. Yeah, it was a good experience, and it was definitely a lot tougher than I thought it had the potential to be. There's pretty big potential to kind of ramp up your level of exertion in that, and so it was kind of comforting, because I'd been out for a while. I hadn't been really in good shape due to my physical health as well, so that it's kind of accessible for people of various different capabilities as well.
Good deal. Have you pushed yourself too hard?
Yeah. At one point, I didn't fall off the bike, but I stopped moving, kind of. It was slow motion, and my legs felt like lead, and I felt, kind of scared, and then the oxygen came back on, and I was, like I had never even experienced that before. And then, yeah, it was kind of a different level of exhaustion, and then kind of a funny, it was funny how fast you recovered when that oxygen came back on. So it was in terms of your energy expenditure, and then recovering from that, it was quite accelerated in terms of, yeah, it was kind of comical, kind of cartoony, how your level of performance is really amplified or decreased based on how hard you're getting pushed.
Yeah, that's like the other day, and Taylor was putting me through it, and I'm on the decreased oxygen and the cycle, and I'm looking at it, and I'm like 15 seconds to go, and I was terrified. It was like oxygen boarding in a way. You just felt like you're being deprived. 15 seconds seemed like a long, long way to that oxygen, but when it gets flipped, and that incredible feeling that you get, just whole body, it's, you can immediately feel that rush of oxygen, and your heart's pounding in your head, and you just know that it's cycling through. It's an amazing feeling, but terrifying in its own right.
Too, my opinion of it is, just so you know, Tree, I'm paralyzed on my left side. I'm about 60% paralyzed in my left leg. I've got 90% paralyzed in my left arm. And in the beginning, it was very hard for me to access the bike, to get on my vertigo, my balance. But after about 3 weeks or a month of doing it constantly, probably 3 times a week, I don't even notice when the switch is flipped. And I'm breathing, I'm doing the slow breaths, I'm doing what Taylor and my team has taught me, Gloria Rios. But it's almost like you just become accustomed to it. And it's like, you live low, you train high, and this allows you to get up into an altitude of the oxygen is less, but I think over time it just becomes easier.
That's great, man. Yeah, I don't know a whole bunch about other people's experience with the machine, but the few conversations I've had just seem to mirror my own in terms of scale of recovery. It's kind of astounding, especially considering the differences between between everybody. I think that's is kind of interesting to me,
Well,
seeing people with
proud
different.
of you, buddy. I really am. I'm proud of everything you're doing,
For
and
sure.
we're just, with Mark, our Adventures in Health team is going to work through a nonprofit called the Move to Improve, and we're going to be sending a lot of veterans up to Mark Scoop's place. And I would love it if you were to join us and be one of the advocates and trainers who puts these guys through the circuit.
I mean, you know how it was with this meeting right here. I mean, Mark's got to make a call, and I'm ready in there. So that's kind of my go-to attitude about this kind of thing, especially when it comes to him. I mean, he's saved my life, and I owe it to be able to help other people, get introduced to that kind of thing.
Right. I mean, he basically saved you, and in return, you have a daughter or a son?
I have a daughter.
So I got 2 daughters too. So my daughters, thank God I'm alive to even see them and be there, because I was on the verge too of not wanting to live after my whole thing. And I think Mark, in a sense, allowed your daughter to have a father, and that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Tough for me to even talk about because I'll get emotional with you, but yeah, Mark, I want to thank you so much for everything, and we have big plans with all of us. And Tree, if we do anything, I would for sure love for you to be part of this whole organization, this team going forward.
Let me jump in and just, like, from a human perspective, nothing that we do or is complicated. It's all very natural. And like, if you're looking from the outside in, it's not intellectually complicated. It's like, get on the bike, kick your ass, and then there's a process you go through. But if you're thinking about doing something like this, don't overstudy it. Just do it. To go to Nike. And in Tree's experience, there was another fella named Nathan that was part of it, that went through a fair bit of recovery. And so and again, he didn't need to know, but when you take somebody that's been enclosed for 15 or 20 years, you see them kind of start to break loose and, say, holy shit, I want to go home and hug my wife. Yeah, he didn't know what was going on. The physiology and all that stuff doesn't matter. It's just do it. Now, Tree, would you mention what you saw going on with Nathan too? The point is that what we're doing is simple, and it's pretty much works every time. I don't know, Ty, you're early in your experiences, but maybe you can comment. Tree, speak to Nathan if you would, please.
Okay. Yeah, I guess when I saw Nathan, I already gone through a couple treatments, and I felt like I was years ahead of him. Like, I was looking back at kind of not an exact copy. That would be a disservice to his history, but I saw a lot of similar traits that I had been dealing with, and listening to him talk was kind of eye-opening. But the to an untrained eye, I mean, I saw his mobility improve. His speech patterns weren't so, I don't know, they weren't so aggressive afterwards. He was calm and kind of collected, which I guess he definitely didn't feel calm and collected when he first arrived. And he exclaimed, between several conversations just between him and I, that he felt things that he didn't even realize were still there, in terms of the that rush of feeling and emotion coming back. He had indicated that he had felt that same exact kind of rush of, a return of something. And I keep talking about this thing in kind of like in a magical way, as it's hard to comprehend. The human mind is just so vast and complicated, and so I try not to pretend to understand too much about it. But man, he was marked difference in terms of body language, his posture, his speech patterns, you know, his own admittance into, you know, feeling different things coming up. And yeah, it was kind of beautiful to watch. You know, he definitely changed during his short time there. And I don't know the ultimate level of progress that he made, but I mean, I saw him make progress, you know. And
Wow.
and it's hard to quantify, you know, when you see a lot of damaged people come in and out. I mean, I spent a lot of time in VA hospitals and in the waiting room, and I'd see these people sitting there talking or, you know, hanging out or whatever, and it's just I don't even know how to explain it, but you know, you go outside and you don't see that on the rest of the other people. You know, there's just something there that is just, you know, wrong. And it kind of, I guess, you know, call me crazy, it kind of spoke to a little like animal instinct inside me. It's like something's off with that person too. You can, you know, almost align yourself spiritually with that hurt in terms of, you know, identifying other people who have issues, you know, processing things. And uh yeah, I don't know, he definitely changed the physical representations of his speech and his posture. I, you know, there's not much more I can say on it.
You think it was a gain of confidence? Maybe the brain fog had lifted and he was able to kind of, you know, connect the dots intellectually a little bit easier and articulate that in speech. Is that,
Yeah.
you know, maybe his posture is a little bit taller because he's more confident in himself and his abilities now?
Yeah, I hate to, like, you know, pick out any one thing, because it can be or not be a, you know, um, the whole causation and, you know, making assumptions based on causation aside. I mean, had a lot of trouble speaking when he first came in. He couldn't go a full sentence without stuttering multiple times, and he was struggling. You could see him struggling with it. And at the very end of his stay there, nice long smooth sentences. Just you know, and whether that was him, you know, becoming used to, you know, his lack of nervousness, or or maybe some neurological deficiencies being corrected, I don't know. But you know, that can be a big thing for some people, just being able to communicate effectively with other people.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why I was asking about kind of the set and setting, so to speak, of Mark's, you know, place when you guys go in there. If that, you know, that has to be a factor, being comfortable, and you know, after a couple of days, knowing that now you have support and you know, in a community in a lot of ways, even though it's really small. You know, that probably speaks volumes when you're going in for this training to, you know, that you're unfamiliar with people. It's like that comfort level, that, you know, levels of familiarity, so to speak, whether that's through people that have a similar background to you or are afflicted with the same kind of things. I think that's really probably just as important as the training that you're actually going through in a lot of ways, right?
Let me jump in and add a couple of things here. You know, if you take a look at these guys, I mean, they were both um, classified as disabled. Tree, I think, was at 70%. Nathan was at 100%.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we didn't really have enough time to run Nathan, you know, fully through. So he had commitments where he had to be elsewhere. So we only really got to work with Nathan for literally 48 hours, but we did see results. The other thing is, you know, since the tree experience, it really doesn't matter. I mean, it matters, but we've worked with, I think, 28 post-concussive cases.
Mm-hmm.
And in 27 of 28, within a very short period of time, we're able to measure substantial restoration of cognitive function But there's really two differences, which is it depends on how or what kind of injury. There's certain injuries that are, I'll call it, quickly recoverable, which boil down to what I model as a loss of blood flow to the part of the brain. And what's happening is, once we get them and we train them, we get the blood flow to the brain and we oxygenate the brain, then that part of the brain just switches on. And in that case, those recoveries are more instant. Then you get into, like in Sean's case here, he had I'll call it a severe stroke, in which case there's literal brain damage, tissue that's gone offline. And when you get into having to go through neurogenesis and growing back nerve tissue, the recovery time is longer because the body's got more work to do. But a lot of what we've seen, like in the veterans and what we saw with both Tree and Nathan and many others, is that when we train them, reoxygenate that part of the brain, if it's a history of mild concussions, a lot of times that recovery process can be almost instant. And that's just like with Tree. I mean, he comes in trouble day one and walks home pretty much healthy day 5. I think a lot of the people that are hearing this are probably more like Tree than they are like Sean or Ben, who we'll be talking about later today. Mm-hmm. So I just say, man, try it. You can't guarantee, but it depends. But a lot of what we've seen, especially in this PTSD, mild concussion, post-concussive syndrome, is very rapidly recoverable. Mm-hmm. So, my fantasy is, hey, number one, let's go out and help these guys. I mean, 22 suicides a day is insane. I mean, these are combat casualties where they actually self-destruct once they get home. That's totally unnecessary. And I'd really like to see this technology find its way all the way upstream where, like you guys, while you're training, if you could do this training as part of your PT while you're in the active military, most of the stuff, in my view, that goes wrong with you just wouldn't happen. And these kids could come home healthy and not create all of this. The other really important thing is that, when I work with Tree's wife, is that whether you know it or not, this PTSD and post-concussive stuff is a communicable disease. Yeah. Okay, because when you come back and you're jacked up, it's hard for your family to help you. And what we see is like, yeah, okay, when we're out looking for help, it's like, yeah, first thing we want to do is fix the service person that came back. But a lot of time there's some mop up that we need to do to help their families and their kids come back to, okay, let's be a good family. Tree, would you spend just a moment talking about, what you think's, gone on from your family's point of view?
You brought up a topic that I wanted to touch on briefly. When I came back a week later, my wife did not know what to do with herself day to day, because that part of me, the damaged part of me that needed to be tended to, keeping an eye on me, changing things, to suit, make the environment better for me. Yeah, she had nothing to do after I came back, in terms of the emotional and physical workload of taking care of a, mentally ill person, a damaged individual. Always asking me the same questions, and I'm like, no, I'm good. The burden was lifted off of her, and she was trying to explain to me that she was just trying to make sure that I was okay. And I'm just like, yeah, there was a void there that needed to be filled, because she was just so used to
being a caregiver and not being a wife.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that is everything for a family, because being a caregiver,
yeah,
is the hardest job on the planet.
She found more time for herself. We were going out and doing things together again. And it was kind of an abrupt shift, and it was very jarring for her. And she laughed and cried about it too. And, you could have a separate conversation with her all by herself without me there, and she'll tell you pretty much the exact same thing. But yeah, the amount of work and effort and energy that she put into me prior to the treatment was just very draining for her. But it was a burden that she was accustomed to carrying, and so there was definitely an adjustment period where my level of emotional independence was just, very imbalancing for her. But she appreciated the change, obviously, and we grew to kind of rebalance our roles a little bit, mostly in the parenting department, where she was a sole parent at that point, before that point, and then I became a contributing member again into the family. And it was funny because then I ended up going back to school and using my GI Bill, and I can't tell you how many people I've read about going to the, using their GI Bill and wasting it because they couldn't stay in because they're not well enough, and then they waste, a few months up to a year or 2 years of their GI Bill being all messed up and not finishing their school or whatnot, and then their benefits gone. I went out and did a year-long trade school for desktop support technician, and I had a schedule I had to keep, and the kind of schedule where I had to make my own hours. I had to be responsible for my own hours. It wasn't just you come in 9 to 5, 3 or 4 days a week or whatever. I needed to find the time myself in order to figure out what hours I wanted to do for that trade school, because it was just kind of like an open classroom kind of deal, and you worked at your own pace within a certain timeline. But yeah, I went out and completed a whole year of school just like that immediately afterwards, and that was not something that I had been successful in, because I have wasted some of my GI Bill trying to go to college or school or whatever before that, and yeah, that was money and time wasted, and people shocked at my reactions to things, and
you've
the
got to feel
embarrassment.
before you can take on more of a workload, right? That's,
So I became immediately functional.
What you would say to the other fathers out there about how you look to your daughter.
Yeah.
And what do you feel like in Teresa's eyes now? I mean, how are you different?
She comes and asks me for stuff now. She asks me for my opinion. She asks me what I think. She asks me for help. She asks me for advice. I'm the dad. I'm somebody she can come to, as opposed to somebody who needed to be avoided, or walked around, or skirted, or yeah.
There you go.
I wasn't I wasn't very fucking useful before. So,
Tree, thank you very much.
I think we're good. Thank you, Trey. Ty, you did an exceptional job.
Right, thanks, Sean. Thanks, Mark. Thank you so much, Tree, for telling your story. I know dredging that stuff up can be difficult, but I think the community need to hear about it.